Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is a game that I was looking forward to since DC Fandom 2020. Like most Arkham fans, I was so excited to see Rocksteady's next foray into the superhero gaming genre. About a year later, when it was confirmed that the game was set in the Arkhamverse, my head exploded. I tried to keep my mind from racing with theories and sat on my hands while it was delayed and delayed as new information revealed that this wouldn't be the type of game I was hoping for. Still, I wanted to keep an open mind and avoided leaks like the plague. Now, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is out, and I think it's a deeply flawed game. There is some fun to be had, particularly traversing the map and the occasional DC Comics magic, but by and large, I really didn't like this game, and I think there are 3 major problems that kept it from being solid. 2 quick disclaimers before getting started. Firstly, I'm just focusing on the story, and there will be spoilers. I'm far too stupid to criticize the gameplay, and I understand it's a niche that appeals to some people. Secondly, opinions are real heated on this game, and I totally get it. We're all passionate dorks and doofuses. I just want to make it clear that even if you enjoyed every single thing about this game, that's totally cool. I wish I had enjoyed it, and I'm genuinely glad some people are digging it. I don't think you're wrong. Opinions aren't wrong, usually. With that all said, let's get into my opinions, starting with the most important problem with this game to me personally: the Arkham connection. From characterizations to world details to some level design, it really feels like the whole Arkham universe angle was just a marketing ploy to get people to buy the game because that franchise had so much goodwill. It's obvious this isn't the same Harley Quinn, literally not the same Deadshot, and not even the same Batman. In some obnoxious nostalgia bait member-berry museum, this game quickly explains away the massive cliffhanger ending of Rocksteady's genre-defining trilogy without really explaining it at all. There was no interest in exploring what the next phase of the Arkham universe story was. They just needed to get Batman in this game, so, yeah. He just decided to do the complete opposite of what he did at the end of Arkham Knight, for no particular reason, and now he's on the newly formed Justice League. It genuinely feels like this game had no intention of being set in the Arkhamverse, but halfway through development, they changed course and tried to include as many surface-level references to those games as possible. And I'm not sure what's worse, if I'm right or if I'm wrong, because either way, nothing about the Arkham universe actually impacts the story. The most direct references we get are from Bruce's hologram in the cave, his use of fear toxin, and Child Ivy, who feels like a ridiculous afterthought included as another marketing stunt, which explains why they revealed her in promotional material. That's the only time I've watched a trailer that had a built-in spoiler warning. Which just goes to show how desperate Rocksteady was for us to know that this was part of the Arkham games we love. But even in those direct Arkham references, what's the impact? How does this Batman being Arkham Batman affect the story? Or how does Poison Ivy being a regrown child? This could have been any Batman and any Poison Ivy, and nothing would have changed. And of course, one of the 4 main characters is supposedly another holdover from the Arkhamverse, but I just can't believe that this Harley Quinn is the same one we last saw in Arkham Knight. Not only has her entire personality been updated to fit the new-aged, zany, independent Harley, but the plot references events that could not have ever happened. At the opening of the game, Harley complains that the Daily Planet never told stories about her solo adventures. This Harley was never like that. Although there was about 9 months between City and Night, she wasn't focused on being this new, independent Harley on her own. She was actively scheming to get revenge on Batman for the Joker's death. Maybe she could have gone solo and become this more modern take in between Arkham Knight and Suicide Squad, but for no reason, the game writes itself into a corner by telling us that Harley has been in the asylum for the 5 years since Night. But because the take on Harley established over 3 games didn't jive with the version of Harley this game wanted to represent, we are fed exposition on a backstory and attitude shift that doesn't fit with the character we know. Another example of this is later in the game when she reunites with Poison Ivy. Harley goes on to say, "Harley and Ivy forever," as a clear reference to their modern relationship. But Arkham Harley had never been romantically involved with Poison Ivy. She was a Joker girl through and through. She also spits on her outfit from Arkham Knight, something she wore of her own free will long after the Joker's death for the sake of showing us her new independence. I don't even have a problem with the modern take on Harley, mostly. But it just doesn't work in the context of this universe. It feels disjointed and unearned. I understand people can change in 5 years, but the references and attitude to previous experiences don't fit with the Harley we know. So, the game should have put in a lot more work to explain such an extreme character shift. I knew Arkham Harley. I have no idea who this Harley is, even after playing an entire game as her, which makes her execution of Arkham Batman and the baffling speech prior all the more hollow and bizarre. I would have enjoyed this game more if it was just okay being its own thing. I still don't love how the characters are presented, and most of the humor is just, oh, silly wordplay. Lady crazy, guy dumb, shark not know human things. I was never gonna love that, but it could have been something I understood and respected for what it was. A weird random DC adventure that's about setting up a long-term gameplay loop by suckering people in with major recognizable characters first. Slapping Arkham on top of that was entirely unnecessary, since Rocksteady already had the name recognition they wanted, and nothing was done to drive the Arkham story forward. Ultimately, I do feel disrespected as a fan. Aside from the Arkham marketing strategy, even the killing the Justice League angle feels like a ploy to get people to buy the game, because the real game begins at the end. This is Suicide Squad Kill Brainiac 13 times. So, dare I ask, why the fuck is Brainiac introduced so late? I actually like this interpretation of Brainiac, and I'm curious to see how Rocksteady handles all his multiverse counterparts. As sick as I am of multiverse crap, I could be in for an adventure hunting him down and showing off some unique realities. You heard me right? I'm at least keeping an open mind about the live service episodes. But if Brainiac is the big selling point on the part of the game where the studio hopes to make most of their money over a long period of time, why does he only appear at the very end of the game? I don't understand it from a business perspective, and I really don't get it from a narrative perspective. Disregarding the story that's still to come, even if the base game is all that existed, he is severely underutilized. Yes, he's the catalyst for all the action, and his skull ship is omnipresent, but we get no sense for his character until right before the end, making the final mission feel like an afterthought. I genuinely think focusing on him more, his control of the League and dynamic with the Squad, would have done wonders for the story. After all, every single Arkham game is built around a central big bad. Joker, Hugo Strange, Black Mask, Scarecrow. Their influence is felt throughout the entire game, but more importantly, they are heard from, interacted with, and shown in person multiple times before the grand finale. The Rocksteady method of creating engaging stories with dynamic characters heavily relies on two things: atmospheric dialogue and personal stakes. The game waits to set both of those up with Brainiac until the final level. And you know what's worse? It's all great. Brainiac's initial confrontation with the Squad should have happened extremely early on. This scene clearly defines the theme of control versus freedom the game is going for, but more importantly, this establishes the personal stakes for the protagonists, a reason that these characters might actually allow themselves to fall over to Brainiac's side. By the point in the game he's actually introduced, we're way too far along for us to believe the Squad will give in. His murder is literally the next mission. But early on, when we're still getting to know these characters and their Squad dynamic is non-existent, we could believe they'd succumb to his temptation. Especially the way the game leaves things with Boomerang. Rather than playing that just for a joke, it could have actually been something nagging at Boomerang throughout the next several hours of gameplay. Brainiac accepting the Squad's initial success against him as the margin of error that he needs to embrace would also explain why he doesn't just absolutely crush them with overwhelming power throughout the story. He's partially allowing himself to be defeated through hubris. The idea of Brainiac attempting to seduce the Suicide Squad over to his side would have allowed for such fun open-world dialogue exchanges long before the end game. Why couldn't we hear Brainiac speaking throughout the game? It would have gone such a long way to flesh him out, but instead, a choice was made to have him be this silent villain, and I think it does him a huge disservice. Imagine Joker or Hugo Strange or Scarecrow not having any dialogue you can just listen in on during the original trilogy. Those moments during gameplay and free roam do a lot of heavy lifting. Plus, everything was right there. Batman is already talking to Brainiac over the communicator, so why can't we hear him? If he's talking to Batman in his head, then why is Batman using the communicator? Not only is it a waste narratively, but it also makes no damn sense. But aside from just Batman and the Squad, wouldn't it have been much more interesting to hear what Brainiac has to say about the League? What's he telling Flash and Green Lantern? What's he have to say about Wonder Woman and Lex Luthor? Those delicious nuggets were right on the table, but the game had no interest in scarfing them down. The biggest sin with Brainiac is that he's underutilized. He has a relationship with every major opponent, he even has a great dynamic with the Squad as a whole, and he embodies the theme of the game. For the Squad, he represents giving up, but also, he can offer them their darkest desire. Deadshot. Why fight a war you may die in just to get to your daughter? Forget about her. Release her hold over you, and embrace true power under Brainiac. If this twisted temptation was introduced earlier, then the protagonist's motivation wouldn't only be a constant barrage of, oh, I want to escape Waller, so I gotta kill these guys. The dynamic could have also included something like, oh, I hate being used as a pawn and constantly struggling, but if I have to be someone else's pawn, at least this guy is offering me something in exchange. The dynamic with Brainiac's mind control should have factored more into the Justice League's actions and the Squad's understanding of them. Brainiac has stripped away the human weaknesses in our heroes, and molded them into his perfect minions who are controlled by their darkest impulses. The problem is that's not how the Justice League are written under Brainiac's control. Instead, they're just total douchebags. But imagine if there was actually something under the surface. Flashes of who these characters really are that give the player and the Squad something to latch onto. If Brainiac was encountered earlier, and the Squad actually processed the information presented by him and didn't just forget it for the sake of a joke, they'd feel some sympathy for the heroes they're killing, which is another massive problem with the story. Listen, I'm all in for killing the Justice League, but whipping your cock out and pissing on the Flash's corpse is grotesque. All those death scenes, except Wonder Woman's, lacked any emotional impact. Yes, the bad guys are killing the good guys, but they're well aware Brainiac is controlling them. Just like how Waller is controlling the Squad. By bringing Brainiac in earlier, understanding the situation the Justice League are in would have given the Squad a genuine reason to have just a little bit more respect for them in death, which in turn could have led to small but meaningful character moments for these villains, a bittersweet victory after finally conquering their nemesis. Instead, it's raunchy gallows humor that hits maybe 20% of the time. Bottom line, Brainiac being a constant personal pressure to the Squad, as well as an overwhelming external pressure from the beginning, would have been the perfect way to fix the tonal and narrative problems this game suffers from. Speaking of which, let's move on to the problem anyone who's seen the trailers could have guessed at: the tone. More broadly, I think this game suffers from a massive identity crisis. Not sure whether or not its hilarious jokes or narrative cohesion should take priority. I'll give you one guess which wins out most often. In fact, how about a quick demonstration? In a relatively early scene, Wonder Woman has Captain Boomerang wrapped in her lasso of truth. This goes how you'd expect. They steal the hilarious joke from Whedon's Justice League, with Boomerang forced to confess his psychological shortcomings, and the lasso works as intended, with him answering Diana's questions honestly. But while still in the lasso, he flat out lies. By no definition did the Flash's thumb just come off. This is a straight up lie, and what you'd expect from Boomerang while not under the influence of the lasso. Although this is an inconsequential moment, It's a perfect demonstration of narrative inconsistencies for the sake of the game's groundbreaking comedic tone. Now, humor is obviously subjective, so my taste will differ from everyone else's. I can only speak for myself when I say that I personally think this brand of comedy is played out and obnoxious. It's not as ludicrous and over the top as it thinks it is. It's more shallow shock value bits coated in a constant spew of monotonous word vomit. That's not to say that every attempt at humor in the game fell flat. I'm sure I smiled a handful of times, but I was taken out of the story far more often than I was enjoying it, and that's due to the tone and its impact on the story. The game struggles to have dramatic moments land because everything around those moments is so mindless. The best this game did was the Wonder Woman death scene, which I still think was directed very poorly, and the worst this game did was the pre-Batman execution monologue from Harley. Her attitude in that scene is unlike her behavior at any other point for the sake of trying to have this big dramatic moment in a game that did nothing to earn it. I think there's one scene that perfectly highlights just how confused and disjointed the tone of this game is, and how it negatively impacts the narrative. The scene where the Suicide Squad finally suits up. Firstly, it's bizarre that Harley implausibly throws a new costume together with a dramatic reveal for a design that is just fine. But that's not the big deal here. The straw that broke my disgusting camel hunchback came after they're all suited up, during the second of like 12 overly dramatic slow-mo scenes. This totally epic and badass moment is punctuated by one of Amanda Waller's people calling out the Suicide Squad, saying "fuck you," and throwing a can at them. Insert laugh track, bazinga! They're surrounded by special ops personnel in the middle of a war zone fighting to save the planet. Who the fuck did that? It's not like there was some rowdy character established amongst Waller's crew. Looking around afterwards, are we supposed to believe it was just one of these guards or maintenance people? I know this could be seen as splitting hairs, but I think it's a genuinely important question that reveals the lack of care and cohesion that went into this game's story. Rather than going through the effort of adding a minor character at the base who could have done this, it's just a joke for the sake of a joke that has no basis in the reality of the game's world. The same can be said about how the squad's lockers are labeled. It looks like old wacky Harley wrote those names, but it had to have been Waller's people. Are we supposed to believe that she's running such an unprofessional unit that her people feel drawing jokes in crayon won't get them reprimanded? That's not how Waller is presented. This game is constantly sacrificing continuity for comedy, and it makes the jokes really difficult to enjoy. If everyone down to the meaningless NPCs are kooky and zany, then no one is. If everything's a joke, then nothing is. This desire to have a funny line every minute oversaturates the narrative. A world filled with characters with the same silly attitude as the squad actually makes them more bland. It's like if every GCPD cop in Arkham Knight were stoic, silent, and brooding. It makes the main characters feel less unique, and the world two-dimensional. In short, I think the overall tone of this game failed on every level. And now, my over-the-top nerd rage comes to an end. What are your thoughts on Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League? Are there any major problems I missed? What about some positives? Please try and be respectful to each other in the comments. Thanks for watching, and take care.